Hi, everyone. Ted Wyman here with another edition of Jet Setting. It's a playoff edition, but could be the last one for the Winnipeg Jets as they are now eliminated from the NHL postseason, losing in 5 games to the Vegas Golden Knights after what I would call a dispirited 4-1 loss in Game 5 on Thursday night. Rick Bowness, the Jets head coach, sure thought so. He had some choice words. Don't know if I've seen a coach availability like that for an awfully long time. He really let his team have it. Scott Billeck, things went wrong for the Winnipeg Jets. There was some serious issues with players not showing up when they were needed most. What was the biggest key to the Jets losing that series?
Yeah, I mean, they played like they played in January and February. I mean, I think we all talked about, I picked the Jets in 6 in this series, and I have no issue with eating that, because if the Jets played the way that they did in the final month of the year, and some of that bled over from the first half of the season, they had every chance in this series. And I understand there were some injuries and all that kind of thing, but if the Jets played to the script that they had at certain times of the year, they had a chance in the series, and they showed that in Game 1. But the problem was when this team hits the adversity roadblock, and that's what they did. And Rick Bowness, when he pulled back the curtain last night, as hard and as fast as he did with this team, it exposed that this team, when it hits adversity, has no idea how to deal with it as a team. And so all you do is you allow certain individual players on this team, and they're mostly their big name players, to pull on all different ropes in all different directions, and it ceases to become a team. It begins to become a selfish, kind of almost defiant act of whatever, and this team, it wilts, it turtles under pressure. That's what it does. That it has no ability to kind of catch itself as it's falling. And Rick Bowness, laid that out to bear last night, and I think everything that he said last night was pent up aggression or frustration, over the last 4 or 5 months of the season, where this team was really starting to fall apart. And Rick Bowness tried everything in the book out of his 5 decades of coaching experience to try and pull this team back up. He tried to coddle them. He tried to be the good cop, the bad cop, the teacher, the parent, all of those things. And at the end of the day, nothing worked. He couldn't, nothing worked. Nothing that he's ever tried worked. And so at the end of the day, you have a team that's, you have a team that's out of the playoffs, first team eliminated, and you have a very frustrated coach who.
Yeah, you sure do, Paul. 30 years in this business for you, man. Ever seen a coach react quite like that?
Good question. I bet you we could find one if we go back. But yeah, that was telling, wasn't it? And what stood out about what he said for me was their best players were far better than our best players. And you don't have to look far down the lineup. The Jets were obviously missing a couple of them, but that doesn't mean that the ones who are still left are going to fold, right? But they did. Pierre-Luc Dubois was invisible. Kyle Connor was invisible until he scored a late, meaningless goal. And Connor Hellebuyck, we're still waiting for him to steal a game. Those are the 3 best players on the Jets team last night. At least they're supposed to be. They weren't. And meanwhile, Mark Stone and company were the best players for Vegas. And you can't have your 4th liners be putting in your best effort and being your most hard-working, dangerous players. That's a recipe for disaster, and that's what the Jets were. And I must say, I'm not shocked. I thought the true Jets showed themselves down the stretch of the second half of the season, squeezed into the playoffs, seemed to have maybe found a little something special. But when real adversity hits, like Scott said, they tend to fold. So I'm not shocked it ended this way. I think I wrote a column questioning their heart back in early March, late February. And you don't hate to say players aren't trying, but I think they just get dispirited and kind of see the writing on the wall. And I wonder about leadership too. I don't want to go on here too long, but I wonder about leadership in that room. If you have 1 or 2 guys who grab everybody by the throat and say, we're not letting this happen, and then the rest kind of follow, right? And I don't think the Jets have that.
They are who we thought they were. It would seem in that situation, based on how they were a good, fast starting team during the regular season, rocketed out to a fight for first place, and then faded fast and fell to 8th, barely got into the playoffs. Very similar in the postseason. Got off to a great start, were pretty good through the first 3 games of this series, and then they just weren't really a match at all for Vegas after that. And you guys both touched on this, and this is obviously more than an elephant in the room. It's a few elephants, and that's what's going to happen with this team from here on. The word you hear a lot of people talk about blowing it up. There could be major changes. There could be lots of players, Dubois, Scheifele, Wheeler, Hellebuyck's futures in question. A lot of these guys might not be back. This might be a full rebuild, restock on draft picks kind of offseason for the Winnipeg Jets. Scott, how do you see it unfolding, and what kind of job is Kevin Cheveldayoff faced with right now? And even, I know I'm asking too much in one question, but should he be the man to do it?
I mean, in my opinion, no, I don't think he should be. I mean, he's going to his 13 off season this summer, and it's funny because for the last 4 or 5 years, we've said this is the biggest off season for Kevin Cheveldayoff. This is the biggest off season for Kevin Cheveldayoff. And he's had them and again and again and again. And we are in the exact same spot, in my opinion, this year as we were last year. The only difference is instead of the players calling it out, it's the head coach. And what changed over the last season, off season, is this seismic move that Kevin Cheveldayoff referred to, the hiring of Rick Bowness. And the one that's gotten for him out of this is him even going further and pulling the curtain back on the disaster that this team is. And that starts with, it could start with Mark Chipman, because he's not blind to any of this either, but he's also the owner. And it starts with Kevin Cheveldayoff, because there's no way in hell that this guy has watched this team and doesn't know the culture problems that it has, the internal dysfunction that this team has had, and he's sat there and maybe he's tried to change it, maybe he hasn't. They used the same head coach for 8 years before Maurice had to basically fire himself. They brought in Rick Bowness to try and change the culture around, and for a little while it worked. I was in Banff with the team when it seemed like everything was all great and that sort of thing. But again, when adversity struck with this team, the real Jets showed up, right? And we saw that last night. We saw it in January and February. And we saw it in a large part of March too. I mean, and that's part of the problem with this team. It's not built to win, and the guy that's tasked with building it to win hasn't built a winner, and that's a problem. And so I don't know. Does Kevin Cheveldayoff come up to the mic tomorrow and talk about a team that he's going? I mean, I think if he does, you probably think he's going to be at the helm tomorrow or for the summer and going forward. He's still got 2 years left on his extension that he got. Well, reportedly it was finally told about last year, but it's a 4-year thing. It happened 2 years ago. And so I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you sell anything in this town to the fan base with your ticket problems and all that stuff with the same leadership. And obviously that includes the players. I think you're getting rid of Mark Scheifele, Blake Wheeler, Pierre-Luc Dubois, potentially Connor Hellebuyck. I think this team needs to be rebuilt around Josh Morrissey, Adam Lowry, the players that actually give an F about this team and show that on a game by game, night by night basis. But at the same time, how do you trust the GM that's been in place since this team started, who's only led this team to 3 series wins in the playoffs? How do you think that this guy should still have a job? What would, and maybe this is a question for both of you, but what would lead you to believe that Kevin Cheveldayoff still has the potential to lead this team to a banner at raising at Canada Life Center? Because I don't see it, and maybe that's a question.
Well, I'll throw that one to you. I'll throw that one to you, Paul. But I also want to know your thoughts on if even Rick Bowness is likely to be back, because seeing his reaction to that game last night. He already looks 10 years older than he did when he got here. I mean, is he even going to want to be back?
That's a great question. What did he sign, a 2-year deal? Scott,
Yeah.
That sounds right. Yeah. Does he want to come back for the 2nd year? And do Mark Chipman and Kevin Cheveldayoff, I mean, that was almost John Tortorella-ish last night, right? I mean, I can't imagine that kind of raw emotion in a negative way sits well with these button-down types like the GM and the co-owner are, I think was a refreshing breath of honesty all season, Rick Bowness.
Yeah.
You know,
Isn't it a problem if
absolutely.
they don't see it? Isn't that just arrogance that we've seen from this leadership group?
It's just a style. It's just a style. They prefer more of a button-down style. So I don't, who knows what they're going to do with Rick. And moving over to, and does Rick want to come back? You're right. I mean, he could have retired. He was planning to retire, got back into this. And didn't we ask him near the end of the regular season, do you any regrets about not retiring and coming here? And he was vehement then that no, he loved the challenge. And he may recharge his batteries and get over the emotion of last night and still want the challenge again. As far as Chevy, he's I still hear from other GMs that he's still one of the best drafters and developers in the league. So that's one tool in the toolbox, but it's only one. You got to be savvy at free agency, and that's tough in Winnipeg. And you've got to be real savvy at swapping, trading players, and at the right time, knowing when to cut bait. Probably been a little too loyal with some here. And so Chevy has, I hate using nicknames, Kevin Cheveldayoff has fallen short in two of those three tools, I think, but he's still a very good draft and develop guy. So I wonder, can they at the very least, if you're going to hang on to him, and that's Mark Chipman's loyalty that'll speak to that, I guess. If you're going to hang on to him, can you at least maybe hire a president / advisor who can take on some of these other areas that aren't Cheveldayoff's strengths? I wonder if they could, because right now it's Cheveldayoff and Chipman, right? There's no other hockey.
The can down the road though, like.
What do you mean?
Like it's not working now, Paul. Right? It's not working now. So you're just going to elevate or
they're not the worst team
or give Cheveldayoff some help. Like, isn't that a problem? Like, isn't that a problem? Like, you got to go out and hire a guy to help Cheveldayoff in his blind spots. Like, why not just get a new GM in here with a fresh set of eyes, like you had with that head coach?
I'm not saying they shouldn't
really try and mold this team, because it's stale, is it not? Is it not stale? 12 years old?
Yeah. And I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm just not sure Mark Shipman will.
And you talk about what that culture has to start somewhere, right? So you do have to look to the top. You got to be in charge of making sure that the culture is right in your, all three of us cover the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. What's the number one thing everybody talks about why the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are successful? It's culture. It's what Mike O'Shea has instilled there, and also Kyle Walters and Wade Miller. I mean, you have to give those guys credit for working to build that culture and to maintaining it and growing it. The Jets seem to be going in the different direction, the exact opposite direction in that area. And, it's hard to imagine that so many of the top core players are at this crossroads, but that's just the truth. And that leaves Kevin Cheveldayoff with an incredibly difficult job. A ton of uncertainty coming for this offseason. Lots of great things to write about, I'm sure, at least, guys. So maybe one of the craziest exit interview days of all time on Saturday at Canada Life Center, after what the coach had to say and what so many of those players have talked about over the years or over the last year in terms of growth from last year and then reverting to it. And we all remember the things Paul Stastny had to say last year. How many of those have even changed? So
I think I'll say little this year.
I think it's going to be a great day, and we'll all be there. And thanks again, guys, for another great edition of Jet Setting. He's Paul Friesen, Scott Billeck. I'm Ted Wyman, and you have been watching Jet Setting on WinnipegSun.com.